We are good. All right. Michelle, welcome back.
Thanks. It's great to be back.
We spoke a few weeks ago and we talked a little bit about your background. We talked a little bit about your bodybuilding career and just opened up a little bit about how you got into fitness and your mindset. And it sounds like you got a lot of great feedback. And it also feels like the conversation was incomplete. I felt like we could have gone for another couple of hours, and we had to cut it a little short. It was also late, and
It was kind
I
of
was
late.
I was tired. But you're back, and today we want to talk a little bit about discipline,
Hmm.
what it means to be disciplined to you, and then just talk about the mindset that goes into it once the motivation goes out. So, what does motivation mean to you?
Motivation, I think of as a fleeting type of experience. I think a lot of our short term goals we can reach through motivation, where we have like a very short window. But I find that very often, let's just say it's the dieting world. If it's I want to lose weight for a wedding, or I have this event coming up and I want to look a certain way, I often think motivation can get you there, but that's where we do that yo yo dieting pattern of, okay, I got the results, but then we don't always get to a point where it becomes a habit and we build that and we develop it. I don't think that motivation and discipline are one and the same. I actually often I think in my own life at least, motivation has been the launching pad for discipline, if that makes
Yeah.
sense, where I apply, like we talked last time about how most of my experience with the fitness world and nutrition has been failures, and those have mostly been motivation driven. It really wasn't until I started getting deeper into the why behind I want to have a healthy body and the why behind I eat what I eat, as opposed to a very short term goal. So I think motivation is something that we have. I think it is important to have, but I don't think that it's reliable. Um, we said last time, I don't always feel motivated to get up in the morning,
Yeah.
but I do, because I have to. I mean, your son has to be fed. What if you don't feel motivated to feed him? Like he
Yeah.
has to eat, right? So motivation, I think, is a good starting point, and where most of us start when we have a goal. We see something, we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so motivated to obtain this goal, or that's where I want to be. But in the long run, it doesn't get us there. Like we talked about not being motivated to go to the gym. I'm less than 2 weeks out from a show right now. I really don't want to be doing as much cardio as I need to, but I am, because I'm committed to the goal. So, um, I guess to answer your question, I think of motivation as being fleeting. I think that it is something that is not reliable long term and won't get us to a really healthy life down the road. But we can use it to get to a point of being disciplined. And once we can utilize things, if we're motivated, we can build habits over a certain period of time, which in return can turn into discipline.
Right.
Um, uh, Really quick, I've noticed a difference in my own personal growth this prep versus the last prep that I did 2 years ago. And I noticed it this week when someone asked me, what are you going to eat for your cheat meal?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a great question. I actually don't know. Probably sushi. That sounds great." But the last time, um, I really I was thinking about candy. I'm a sweet tooth
Yeah.
to the core. And now I think so much about how I feel after I eat certain foods. And I don't actually really want to eat a bunch of candy after my show, and I haven't had it for 6 months. And I guess the difference between the last time and this time is probably that I have more discipline now. And I did back then, and I did get to the goal. But immediately after the goal, I wanted the old stuff. I wanted the crap food, and I wanted the candy, and I wanted to not reverse diet properly. And this time around, I'm like, I really want to keep a lot of these habits and this and continue to apply this discipline to my life for the long haul. And is it okay if I dive into discipline?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, define discipline.
I mean, I don't know if I have a definition from not Webster's, but I applying discipline long term, I think is challenging to do if we don't know the why behind what drives the discipline. Motivation, I think, can be very, like I said, short term. And those things aren't always bad. Maybe we want to have a beach body for the summer. Maybe we want to look a certain way for a wedding. But I think discipline for me, when I think of the very, very long haul goals, I think about things like if I find out that I have something wrong with me medically, and if a doctor were to present to me and say, "Hey, Michelle, do you want to walk if I have a son someday? Do you want to walk your son down the aisle for his wedding?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm sure I would want to. Hypothetically speaking, would I want to run with grandkids? Would I want to?" And so my why, even though it's hypothetical, it's this vision that I have for the future of that's what really drives the desire to be healthy and to be fit, is this underlying why. And everyone's going to have a different why. Not everyone's going to want to have kids or grandkids or walk their son down the aisle, but I've had to get very clear on what drives the discipline, because I don't stick to the goal if I don't have the why to develop the mindset of this is where we're going and we're going to build a healthy life here. We are going to follow these steps, and even if that means hiring a coach or someone external to help me with those things, I'm so fixed on that long-term vision that it allows me to have discipline, where it's not even a choice in my mind of getting up in the morning and doing some cardio. I try to drink lately I've been drinking almost 2 gallons of water a day. But it's just not even a question in my mind once my why has become clear. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting with discipline because I often hear people who say they're very disciplined, but then they lack in other areas, right? And so I could see where people can be disciplined for a specific subject. Like, let's say I'm very disciplined for a prep.
Yeah.
But then I'm not very disciplined at work, right? So I tend to procrastinate at work or skip out on work. And so where does that fall, right? So is discipline for an individual subject, or are we talking about discipline as an individual, like as a whole, right? Because I think of discipline as a, like, what I think when I think of a person who is disciplined, I think a person who, regardless of what the situation is, wakes up.
Yeah.
Right? No matter if the whole world's falling apart, you still get up. I think of discipline when, like you said, like I think of like a person. I can think of a person who's very disciplined right now. Andrea in particular, she's very disciplined. She just took an injury. She just took an injury yesterday on a bike. She ran into a rail, and she was in the hospital for a couple hours, and she's got an injury to her arm, so she can't carry the baby, but she's still taking care of the baby regardless with one arm, right? She's figuring it out, and she's very disciplined in the sense that She still got her workout after getting out of the ER. She still ate her food, right? It was so easy for her to just lay in bed and be a victim of her situation, but she still was able to get the things done, right? And I agree with you with the why. I think the why is very important. But why do you think certain people are very selective with discipline? Like, what do you think is the missing piece?
That's a really good point because, like you said, people can be so disciplined in one area and it doesn't always translate to other parts of their life. Or let's say someone is great in their career and they're not present at all at home. I imagine that a lot of it has to do with our backgrounds and how the kind of, I don't want to get too nerdy here, but we build these neural pathways and these things that we observe over time, and sometimes we don't even realize that we live a certain way because it's just what we've known. And I think when someone has witnessed or grew up with a certain type of discipline, they probably naturally start taking that on without even realizing it. And sometimes we have to do, I don't want to necessarily bring up that self-audit thing again, but in the same capacity, we can look at our lives, and I think we have to observe where are my areas that I could be more disciplined in. Because none of us, I definitely don't feel like I am perfectly disciplined in all areas of my life. I think I've done fitness pretty well and nutrition and work, but I'm not always the best at waking up and saying, I'm going to meditate for a few minutes. And sometimes I just kind of like get my day rolling and don't take time to take care of other practical things. So I would love to tell you that I'm an incredibly disciplined person, but I am in certain areas and I'm not as a whole. And I think something we're not always the best at is taking moments to just reflect. And we have to be looking at, like, if I look at your life and I'm surrounded by other people, we really do become more like the people we spend our time around. So if I see your discipline in an area, I naturally am going to be more drawn to start, oh, wow, he's really disciplined in this area. I think I might start applying that to my life. I don't have an answer for you as far as what is the missing link or the missing piece, but I think a lot of it is just that we can, like I said before, I don't want to quote T Swift, but I'm going to, hey, I'm the problem, it's me. And we, I think very often don't look at where do I have to take ownership in my life? What areas am I lacking? What areas could I grow in? We are not so great about looking, almost setting, I don't want to say micro goals, but in a way, it seems like only once a year we really look at our lives, and that's, the end of the year.
Yeah, New Year's.
And we really look at ourselves more. And then we think, okay, what big things do I want to change? And very often those goals aren't realistic and they aren't something, but if we are mindful of looking at things in a smaller way, from small scale, from here to here to here to here, we have to constantly be learning, listening to podcasts, reading books. I think what we don't realize is by a certain age, you have to have it all figured out, right? Yeah. But then we learn that, oh, I'm actually figuring it out as I go. So the areas that I used to be disciplined in before, I have applied a lot of those things, and they've also adapted and changed over the years, but the mindset behind it has been the same. But sometimes I have to take a look at myself and say, oh, I'm not applying this discipline to this area of my life. And I'll start holding myself accountable to it. And I'll tell a friend. I'll tell the best friend, and I'll say, hey, I see this, and I'm going to speak this into existence and say, will you hold me accountable to it? Or another aspect, just on a side note here, those friends that speak truth and love into your life, and they see an area where you could flourish and grow more, and they speak to it and they say, hey, I'm going to call you out and say, you're doing well, and I see some room for growth in this area. And those are the friends I end up appreciating the most. I think that missing link is sometimes community. It's sometimes people having an outsider perspective. Like I said, those neural pathways get so ingrained in us that we don't even see ourselves truly for who we are sometimes. And we have to step outside and look at things from a broader scope. And sometimes that means having accountability, having a life coach, a trainer, a nutrition coach. That applies to so many areas. But discipline takes time too.
It does.
It's almost a skill in a way, something that we have to really work on. It doesn't just come overnight.
Yeah. You said something about taking ownership, and I think that's the big one right there. Yeah. Right? It's owning. Taking ownership of all your actions and everything. I think it's very easy to fall into a victim mentality.
Yeah.
Right? And when you take ownership, then you start realizing, like, all right, this is an area, like you said, that I need to work on. So I'm going to make it a goal, and I'm going to be very observant of myself, and I'm going to keep making sure that I develop these habits so that it becomes a consistent behavior. And that's the other part too, consistency.
Yeah.
We lack a lot of consistency.
We do.
Right?
Yeah.
When I can think of some of my most disciplined moments in my life, when I was the most disciplined or when I've been the most disciplined, I think right now I'm living a moment where I'm actually being very disciplined as well, and I've purposely been working towards it. Right, it's been on my mind every single day. I think another moment that I can think of was trying to become a professional athlete. I was surrounded by a lot of very disciplined people around me. I had mentors, I had coaches. I was intaking great information, positive information, right? And when I can think of some of my most undisciplined moments, ages 23 to 28, 29, I was surrounded by people who were not very disciplined.
Yeah.
Right? I was surrounded by people who weren't doing positive things. Right? So I think definitely who you surround yourself with influences the type of discipline that you can have. And not that it's everything, right? Not that you can't be a disciplined person with, living in a horrible environment or in a bad environment, but I think it definitely helps having that support and being able to see examples of it too. I think that's really good for athletics. For us, it was just that set schedule that they had for us, which we got into the groove of it. And then you start seeing the success happen. And so it just becomes this daily thing that we do, right? Like waking up 5 a.m. for me, 4 a.m. for me has been since I was 15. And that was just because of soccer. Yeah. That's how the schedule always worked. And now, maybe back then I didn't think about it too much, but now I see the difference from the people who wake up at 5 and the people who like to sleep until 8, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes by 8 o'clock, I already have 3 hours of done work. I'm already ahead of the game. And when you compound those behaviors over years, you start to realize how you start moving a little faster than certain people. And, and usually those people are the ones that will say, you're very lucky, or, why is it always you type of deal. Right. And so it goes back to that, right? Not being able to look at yourself and realize that of the things that they're not doing on the day-to-day basis, which I think is very important too.
Yeah. I have a couple things. When I, this week I had someone tell me, wow, it must be nice. Must be nice to have your body. And I actually didn't really respond. Some things I've learned aren't worth your energy it's like, oh, I'm just going to let them think whatever they wish. It definitely wasn't 5 months of weighing out every gram of food I eat. But that's we live in a kind of like that victim mentality world too, where some people are lucky and some people aren't. And, those who of us who are as fortunate enough to start seeing that I am responsible for my life, I think we get to learn. And even if it's from the past, even if I think we spend so much of our time and energy ruminating on things that are in the past. I've always seen, or I shouldn't say always, but the last 5, 10 years, I've talked to people about energy management over time management. And I have this visual image of my brain being a pie chart. And I think about if it's an energy like map or a chart, how much of that energy is being spent on things in the past that I have no control over? How much of it is in the present? I feel like it's usually a pretty small, and then the future. But sometimes the future portion can also include worries and concerns. And so it's not necessarily a eustress, like a positive type of stress. It can be negative and negatively take away from my energy. So to go back to discipline even and mindset, I think if we could take out as much of the things that are consuming our energy from the past and the things we can't control, and our mind is really just this big record of the past in a way. Like the brain remembers things. We can't always bring them to recall, but it's just all these different neural pathways that have been built up over time, and it becomes the solidified thing that we keep rehearsing some of the same things over and over again. And so I guess when I think about how do you become a disciplined person, I think for me it's almost a weeding out process of what things are taking up my energy that shouldn't be there anymore or aren't worth ruminating on anymore because they're not serving me or serving my future or aiding in my discipline towards a specific goal. Because once I get aligned with the why, then that energy shifts from I'm so much more present, and my future part can even take up more, where it's a vision type of thing. And it's crazy, but even the last couple weeks, I've been so amazed by how powerful my mind is to tell my body what to do. As you get closer to the show, you get more tired, you're doing more cardio, your calories are down. And I have felt like, wow, the more I ruminate on the negative or how hard it is, the harder it is. But the more I realize, no, we got this, no problem. Just one more step, 1 more minute of cardio, 1 more rep, some rest. I really do think so much of it does boil down to the mind and our energy and where is our energy being spent. And if we can weed out those things that are no longer serving us, then we can fill up so much more space for the future, for hope, for discipline, and get ourselves aligned with where we're going. And sometimes we don't know exactly where we're going or what the why is. And I think that's a very hard part for people, myself included, is, well, what is my calling? What is my specific thing? And I always go back to those building blocks of, okay, what can I build right now? Well, I think there's some very fundamental things that we can always be building that will, no matter what career path or what trajectory we land on, will aid in those things, like building a healthy body, building a strong mindset of being able to get through anything in the toughest moments, getting to know people and community. Any areas where I've been able to improve discipline has usually been the direct impact of someone else in my life where they're a disciplined person. And I don't know about you, but I never really fit in when I was younger even. And I can't even say exactly why, but I've started to learn that it's really actually okay that I don't belong at other people's tables and at some point just feel like I had to build my own, even though quite frankly I can't hang a mirror without putting 10 holes in the wall, so I should not have to build a table ever, but I shouldn't be allowed to. But sometimes you have to build your own space, and then eventually that community follows. And that, like you had said, the examples that you've had of other people aiding your discipline. Now, you started 4 or 5 a.m. Not everybody does. I do think there are some people who thrive at night even, and so I don't necessarily think it's a cookie cutter, one thing fits all.
Right.
And I think a lot of people get that perspective of, oh, if I don't wake up at this time, then I'm not a disciplined person. It's just that's what's really, really worked for you. And I would agree. I think it's more like when the alarm goes off, it's, hey, it is time to get up. Like, let's make this day going. And I also think the lack of motivation or discipline to wake up is often due to a lack of passion.
Mm-hmm.
It's
100%.
like you talked last time about you're almost up later at night because it's because you're so passionate. But the shift for you, I remember you had shared, was you talked about the victim thing and what the accident. And then you realized there was a shift for you of your life isn't about you, it's about other people. And if we can tie that into the why, that my life isn't about me, like almost like God gave me another day and it's not for me, it's because someone else needs me. And the discipline allows me to become a stronger person that's able to better show up for other people. And there's a better version of myself. And the why is kind of like, the why is that there's other people on the other side that need me. And they need you. And they need so many people that listen to this. And once our heart gets connected, it's like it's that, I think so often the missing link is the passion and the heart behind it. Mm-hmm. And what drives the discipline. Because if it's just a vain goal, like a body thing. I mean, like today I got this message. You can shut me off anytime. I know I'm talking a lot.
Hey, keep going. You're on fire.
I didn't know
right
I
now.
had any of this in me today, honestly.
Go for it.
I got a message today even, and this is a few days after I had posted a video, and someone a guy openly sharing that, this is so I think it was one of the videos about, it was probably more along the lines of I didn't watch the exact video that he responded to, but it was along the lines of that vanity, or for guys. I can't speak to this. And it was great for me to see more of a guy's perspective of, if you're not muscular and if you're not XYZ in the male culture, a lot of your worth is seen on how big you are, or how much you make, or we could say a lot of things there. And for women, I think a lot of it is appearance based, and it's just, a lot of people have opened up to me the last week or two about the vanity of it and how mentally draining it is. And I remember the last show I did is very different for me than this show. The last show I love the statement, live where your feet are. And I don't know why, it's been something it's been kind of something I think about almost every day. Okay, live where your feet are. If my mind gets too busy, I stop. And I'm like, okay, I get regrounded again. But my last prep, I feel like it was not all a blur, but it was that this is where I have to go, and this is it was all about that, getting on the stage and not enjoying the whole process. And this time around, it's weird. I'm like, is it actually August yet? I think it's not even August yet. Mm-hmm. And July has been such a slow month, but in the best way, because I've just been living it, and I've been in it, and every day. And to tie back with when you were talking about how people will look and say you're lucky, but you're like, oh, it's not because I'm disciplined and I wake up at 5 and I've already had. But I almost see life like we all have the same 24 hours, but in my mind I have 2 days, and almost 3 in a way, where I have like my productive work day, and then I have my bodybuilding, and I have my friends, and other goals and visions that I'm looking towards, and soon it'll be grad school, and I'm trying to maximize that time as much as I can to make the biggest difference, so I can become the better version of myself, so I can answer the why, which is to show up for the people that need me down the road. And now it's weird because I'm finding myself wanting to maximize my time instead of sitting back on a couch and watching Netflix, which thankfully has never really been my thing, but I'm sure I've had other things. But there's this way of almost building that discipline in a way of now my mind, in my mind, there's 2 days in a day. I know that's weird. Mm-hmm. But I just think of it that way. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do with the first day and what am I going to do with the second day? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's only Monday. And so now I'm finding myself thinking, wow, how did I not maximize my time this well? It flies by otherwise. It just kind of like becomes this blur. But forgive me for being all over the place. It's definitely prep brain.
You're great.
But
going.
the first prep, I looked back and I remember I walked into the gym and I learned there's really I don't get upset or angry. Usually I'm pretty mild mannered. I'm very passionate though. And someone called me skinny and I think I got dagger eyes. I'm pretty positive. And if they're listening to this, they know exactly what happened. But it was funny. I had a visible response and I was so upset. And I look back at those photos and I'm like, wow, I actually kind of was skinny. But I back then it was never enough. It was no, you have to change this about your physique and no. And I couldn't appreciate it until I actually got on stage. And thankfully I was able to be fully present when I was on stage, but I got past that prep and then I definitely did not reverse diet properly. I just thought it was a free for all and it was okay to eat candy and eat out more. And it affected me, but I look at this prep and I'm like, wow, like I'm able to be present and see the changes. And someone said to me this week, wow, I wish you looked like this all the time. And I said, I don't. I was like, because I know the sacrifice it takes and I know that it's not realistic to maintain. So because in my mind, I know this isn't realistic to maintain year round. I'm like, no, but maybe a month ago, that version of Michelle, like that degree of being body fat percentage and things, I'm like, that's probably more reasonable for me to maintain. But in my mind, I know this isn't there, so I don't let myself, I guess, get to that point of feeling like I need to be here all the time because it's not. And then other responses to the podcast last time, a lot of them were people having just a genuine curiosity about bodybuilding, and a couple of your clients, by the way, reached out to me and were saying, hey, I'd like to talk to you about that. And I was really honest and I said, I'm in a really busy season of life right now, and I'll get back to you soon type of thing, and would love to connect more. And then other people were talking about their own body image stuff and the vanity of it. And I love bodybuilding, but I really don't think it's for everybody. It's a sport. It is. Yeah. You have to have some genetics for it, and especially that discipline, because motivation will not get you there. I had there's someone I found out in Power that's competing, and I just asked them how they were doing, and this is really common, and they were like, I had a total emotional breakdown. And I'm like, yeah, that definitely, I was like, that's normal, just so you know, especially first time around. But a lot of people don't see that. They just see the body pictures and the changes and the transformation, but they don't always see the mental toughness that you have to have. And anyways, that's such as life, right?
Yeah, it can get interesting, right, with the body, especially in the bodybuilding world, when you start looking at yourself and you start picking at yourself on a daily basis. Yeah. You said something the other week though when we spoke that really caught my attention, and it actually, I think for me, for the last year, I think after Luca was born, I think before, I would say when I got into the fitness space, I started using bodybuilding as a way to get business, right? And I think that's how a lot of people do, right? That's your identity. That's your proof of concept. I know how to get lean, and I can get you lean. And that's usually what a lot of people market, right? Themselves out without a T-shirt. And it becomes like, okay, now it's a competition. That other trainer over there has bigger delts, so I'm gonna go bigger too, right? And it's this competition of who has the better body, and that's how you prove who's a better trainer realistically. At least that's what starts to go in your mind. And when I got away from it, because it wasn't healthy for me, right? I spoke to you about it. I knew what healthy was before. I've never had a problem with my body.
Yeah.
Never looked at myself and was like, oh, you look fat, or oh, you don't look good enough. I've always been very confident about how I feel, and I always enjoyed how I feel, right? Like I never had an issue with it. But recently, I think over the last year, I stopped. I don't want to say caring, but I stopped looking and seeing like, oh, how do I look? Like I'm like, I look good. Like I don't need to worry about it. The flip side of that though was that as I stopped caring about it, I started skipping workouts, and it was like, oh, I'm gonna take a break of these workouts because I'm busy with work.
Yeah. And
so I'm gonna focus on work. I'm gonna take a couple months off, and so I stopped working out. And then with that came, I'm going to start eating a little bit of this, and I'm going to start eating a little bit of that. And even though I didn't get out of shape, but I slowly started to allow alcohol in, slowly starting to allow chips in, slowly started to skip workouts. And, for me, my answer to that was always like, I mean, it doesn't matter. Like the business is built. I still got a 6-pack, still 10% body fat, whatever it is, right? Like, but then you said something about building a body, right? And that's being one of the values and being one of the main things for you of building a legacy. And it made me think. I was like, okay, I might not need to quote unquote look better, but I could still take better care of myself. And I think it goes back to that, right? Like learning how to take better care of yourself, working out, not for the fact that you're going to look better, but because it benefits your health. Running, not because you want to run a race, but because it's great for cardiovascular health, right? And thinking about the long game. And so after we had our conversation, I started that 60-day challenge where a lot of the stuff that I have in there, I already do. And I would say it's that 80-20 rule. And I had this conversation with Andrea, and I told her, I was like, we talk a lot about the 80-20 rule. And then I was like, why can't it be 100 though? Like why can't it be we work out on a daily basis, right? Why can't, does mobility not count as a workout, right? Like I get there's rest days and everything, but why can't we do something active every single day and move our body in a different type of way? And so I set this 60-day challenge to work out every single day, to run every single day, to put out a piece of content every single day that provides value, to drink water every single day. And these are things that, to somebody is like, oh, that's extreme. Right. But a mile is not very long. Half a mile is not very long. Right. Yeah. So I'm not saying running 40 minutes every single day or an hour every single day. Yeah. What I've done is, I set my schedule, and the days that I have recovery, the days that I'm feeling beat up, I go for a light jog, very light jog, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and call it a day. I actually feel better when I do that. I've noticed that. My workouts, they haven't been as long. They've been shorter. I haven't pushed myself as hard, but I've been just being very observant of what I'm doing and why I'm doing certain things. I've always had injuries because you're trying to lift as much heavy weight and progressive overload and always trying to do this, right? And I think to a certain extent, yes, you do have to train to build muscle, right, to get a certain amount of muscle, but I'm at a point in my life where I don't really need more, right? I just need to be able to take good care of myself. I need to make sure that I'm mobile. I need to make sure that I don't lose a lot of my strength. I don't lose my explosiveness.
Yeah.
And then we started, and then what's happened in the last, I think we're on day 12. What's happened in the last 12 days it's all this energy, and my focus has just come together, right? I feel, like I said, I feel very disciplined right now.
Yeah.
I am tired, right? But then I still have to do it at the end of the day. Like today, I still have a workout to do.
Yeah.
It's not going to be long. It'll be 20, 30 minutes. But I at least put in time for my body and said, like I'm going to exercise you today, so that way I don't have to worry about it 50 years later down the road.
Yeah.
And it's these little deposits that we have to continue to do, so that way, later in life we don't pay the price. And it was very interesting how just that one comment sparked this whole idea. And I was like, I should care about how I look. I should be able to look at myself and not look at myself in a negative way, but I should want to maintain a certain look and feel a specific way. And I said it today. I said it today to Andrea. I was like, honestly, I think I've hit, like, if there was a day where I feel I hit my peak, like today was my peak. Like today I feel the best. I went for a run this morning, ran like I think 9 miles this morning out on the trails with some friends. Started reaching out to other people that maybe were good friends of mine, and I haven't put time into those relationships. My buddy's getting married, so I started helping him out with that. We went on a run. What else did I do? I worked on my business today. We had a great conversation about our future and things that had to get done and stuff that I had to get rid of that weren't, helping me move forward. And now we're having this conversation, and it's been a very, very productive day. I'm eating well, and I feel great. I feel amazing. Yesterday we went on a bike ride, and it was one of the first moments I remember just riding down this. I was riding down this hill where we're going 30, 40 miles an hour, and it was like the whole world just stopped, and it was just like you said, my feet were underneath me, and it was like we're living now, right? And it was just one of those amazing moments, because that's when you realize like you're dialed in, like you're about to take off right now, and whatever you are doing, just keep doing it.
Yeah.
Keep taking care of yourself. You're doing an amazing job. But I think you need to have those conversations with yourself. You need to figure out your why, and you need to keep cleaning that up. And I think conversations are great, right? Having these positive conversations. And I sent you a message last time after we spoke. I was like, this is the first time like I felt fueled up. I felt ready to go after having our conversation, because it was one of the first times that I was able to sit down in front of the person, not be judged, and just go through certain emotions and go through certain thoughts and challenge one another. And it was great, right?
Yeah, I left.
It was great.
I also left feeling that way. I'm like, wow, you sent me that message, and the feelings are so mutual. There's something that lit a fire in me too, and I think that's that camaraderie. You find people that have that like-minded heart. And there's something deeper there, though. It's not just, we're both into fitness in one way or another, and have had different facets. And you've been soccer and bodybuilding, and have been in that for a long time. And I've probably more recently gotten into stuff like that. Not soccer though, but it's that heart behind it. It's that passion behind it. It lit that little fire, And it's just, we need things like this. We need community. You mentioned something about the little deposits. I think sometimes, because we have that societal, I'll do it tomorrow, or maybe don't always pay attention to what we do on the weekends and how it impacts. I think a lot of people are trying to escape their lives. But those little mini deposits we make, whether it's 10, 20 minutes, sometimes we just mentally need it, if that makes sense. Sometimes it's that I accomplished it, I did the thing, and then it keeps us on track. It's too easy once we go off a day or two to just say, oh gosh. And it's not a bad thing. I think there's seasons of a little bit of chips here, a little bit of alcohol here and there, right? Like, it's not a bad thing necessarily. It's probably the difference too between someone who is just starting to get on their journey of health and fitness and trying to find that balance versus you who has been in it for a long time. So yeah, why not 100%? And I'd like to do a better job myself of not labeling food as always being good or bad and just having an overall healthier relationship with food. I mean, I am stunned by the fact that I don't want to eat candy after my show, to be quite honest. I have been like a sour candy freak. I could easily eat a pound of it, no problem. But I don't want to because I don't like how it makes me feel. And then I feel like I'm hungover and I'm sick and then I'm unproductive. And then I think about crap. Well, then I'm not going to be productive. Then I can't accomplish my goals. And I have, at the end of the day, if I really think it's not about me, if I'm not well, if I'm not my best version, then I am actually letting people down who look up to me because I'm not able to show up for them in that time. So I think the discipline has become such a bigger thing for me where there's this trickle down effect that if I don't follow through with what I say I'm going to do to myself, this is my own commitment to myself, then I'm in some capacity letting down the people that look up to me, even if they don't ever say it, or people that look up to you. I've never thought that people look up to me, but there's something innate in you and I that we're natural leaders. And I think it's because we go a little bit against the grain, Yeah. But yeah, that bigger picture and just the daily deposits, I think something like bodybuilding can be a little bit extreme, but it doesn't always have to be that. I know people who have been able to even do a prep with 45 minutes of training, not a ton of cardio, and it's where it's also having the coach aspect of them knowing your body and what's going to work best for you. But it doesn't always have to look like that. I'd love to see more of that happy medium. Like when someone came to me this week and said, wow, I wish you looked like this year round, and I'm kind of like, okay, cool. I know that's not realistic for me, but I think if I maybe a month or two ago and I looked that way, I'm like, oh, I could absolutely maintain that. I feel good, I look good. And so much of that is, you had mentioned making it 100%. I think so much of it, though, is just how we feel. Because when we feel good, we feel confident. When we feel confident, we want to do more things with our lives, if that makes sense. So it all really boils down to, a lot of it is, how do we feel around people? How does this food make me feel? How does, there's so many factors in our lives and in our environment. And if we can start pinpointing those, and I've become a little bit more mindful of not just the things to take on, because I also realize that while we all have 24 hours, we do have to be picky about it. And this is a constant conflict in my mind where, because I have a big heart and I love people, it's really hard for me to say no, especially as being like a people pleaser in a way. I've learned it's okay that we can take those times to take care of ourselves, because we are creating that better version of ourselves so we can show up in a stronger capacity. Because if we stop doing those things, if we stop taking care of ourselves, we can't keep showing up. We're showing up at the old version of ourselves that's empty and dry, and it will eventually deplete. But to go back, I think sometimes we can look at the things in our lives. Maybe there's some things we can take out. I don't know, maybe it's the quantity of time that's on social media. Maybe it's just looking practically at how our time is spent or how our energy is spent, who it's spent with, things like that. But
yeah, I have a question that, as you were talking about bodybuilding, that popped up to my head as you were saying. I think for a lot of people that get into the bodybuilding world because they want to change their bodies, right, and get caught up into the comparison game, which we know that obviously it can lead people to some drastic decisions, right? And particularly in men, young men, right, taking drugs, stuff like that, just to get that trophy. But if you were to take the competition out, if there was no competition, if there was no show day, what would bodybuilding mean? Like, what does that actually mean to you if you didn't have to go and stand in front of a judge and compare yourself to others?
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, we talked about this a little bit last time. My why behind bodybuilding is not necessarily the vanity of it. It is a lot of it is the self-sacrifice. It's this is such a silly example, but I mean, I even choose to live in a more simple, and I don't want to say frugal way, but I am okay with having a simple home and things because I want to, when I have children, when I have a family, I want to be able to give more to them. So there's certain things that I'm willing to sacrifice at this point in my life that I know will lead to long-term benefits for the people around me. And again, it's really that mindset of where am I going? The bodybuilding stuff for me is, number one, I did say I'm passionate about building a body. I really do. There's something about me going in and lifting some weights, and it makes me feel so incredibly confident. I feel like this goddess that walks in, and it's not like I don't see myself that way, but I feel it. I feel so empowered. So it boosts my confidence. And there is that capacity of when you look good, you feel good. But at the end of the day, it's not fun to get all that attention, because what is really behind all of it when you look beyond the curtain is the mindset of someone who often is a competitor. Is there's very often they love the work behind it. And for me, yeah, you could take away the stage and I would still keep doing it. I would still keep showing up because I love all of the character growth that comes from it. And I do enjoy the fact that wouldn't call myself an artist, but in the gym I am. And it's like I get to sculpt something, but I'm also at the same time as sculpting a body, I'm sculpting my mind. I'm using my mindset and the discipline, and it's the showing up every day. And it's that kind of thing really does bleed into every other part of my life. And I don't think I like to think it doesn't completely consume my life, but it really is something that adds so much joy to my life personally. And I think everybody has to, I started getting really curious at a young age for some reason, asking older people about their regrets. And what things do you regret? If you could go back, what would you change? And something someone had said was, find something that keeps you fit. And I was like, okay, cool. So I tried a few things, and I found a lot of joy out of things. I mean, I enjoyed running when I did it. I enjoyed cycling a little bit. I then got into the bodybuilding thing, and it brings a lot of joy to my life, but it may not be a forever thing. But what it is doing is developing my character in the meantime. And I think it is having the other blessing in it is that I am building muscle so that when I'm older, I'm going to have, the likelihood of osteoporosis is less. There's a lot of benefits to having muscular structure in the long haul. So I always thought bodybuilding as a way of, if I do it in a healthy way personally, then I get to build muscle, help myself in the long haul. I'm not saying I'm opposed in any capacity to something like powerlifting or moving heavy weight. I don't have there's something in me that has not had any desire to deadlift 405 pounds. I've never been that girl that's like, I want to move as much weight as possible. But I'm like, I really enjoy lifting the weights. So I found this happy medium where I really enjoyed the weights, but I didn't care about lifting the most, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same, right? And what I was trying to get with that question is that I think bodybuilding is a lifestyle, right? It's a lifestyle, and I think that It's a lifestyle that needs to be very well defined, and I don't think many people have the definition of it. I think many people are living through the image
Yeah.
of what bodybuilding looks like. But if you just take the word itself,
Yeah.
bodybuilding, right? If you look at a cyclist, which are in great shape, are they not a bodybuilder? If they're building their body, like does that not make them a bodybuilder, or is a bodybuilder only a person who lifts weights,
Yeah.
who looks the biggest, the leanest, the most jacked on stage,
Yeah.
right? So I think bodybuilding is a lifestyle, and it's a way of living to me, and at least that's how I've started to define it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of everything. It's like you said, it's the mindset that goes into it, right? The doing the work. It's the showing up. It's the discipline that it requires. It's the nutrition that it requires. It's lifting weights, part of it, right? But I also think cycling gives you a certain look. I also think that running gives you a certain look. I also think that sports give you a certain look. I mean, look at football players, right?
Yeah.
They could probably step on a stage and win a couple shows.
Yeah.
And not train like many bodybuilders do. Right?
And I'm sure there's also a lot of people that have never considered bodybuilding that would just be phenomenal. They could step on stage. You see people that try so hard to be a quote unquote bodybuilder. They'll spend years and years and years doing competitions and they won't place or they won't get an overall or they won't go to nationals or they won't get a pro card. And over time, maybe they'll eventually get it. But then you see one person who has just been building their body for years and years and years, and they decide, oh, maybe I'll do a show. And then it doesn't happen that often, but then they'll win everything. They'll get a pro card. They'll go to Olympia. That happens for people. And I like that concept of building the body. And I do think sometimes there can be a little bit of an ego or an identity to it. You know, we're really just, when we define ourselves, we're just the accumulation of things that we're passionate about, that we do, accomplishments. So it becomes a part of, when you're a bodybuilder, I guess the identity is that you're one who strips down, gets a tan, stands on stage, but like, it is, though, a sport, and I think a lot of people don't view it as a lifestyle, which I think you mentioned. It's almost like, for some, I've noticed it's like an on and off switch, where it's like they're on when they're on prep, but then they're off, and you'll see them blow up, and they'll gain 40 pounds, and that can't be healthy, you know? Like, there obviously is a proper on-season and off-season. I like to call off-season improvement season, because I don't see myself as being off. I'm going to keep showing up at the gym. I'm going to keep eating well. You know, I might have a cheat meal here and there type of thing, but I'm not off, going off the rails.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is more of a lifestyle. But
yeah. And the reason why I thought about that too is because I also thought about the word success, right? What, like, we see as millionaires are considered successful.
Yeah.
Right. CEOs are considered successful. But what about the teacher that gives her entire life to educate youth?
Right.
Is she not successful because she doesn't have a certain amount of dollar? Right. So does the person who doesn't have the 120, 115 pounds of muscle that some of these big bodybuilders have, is that person not a qualified bodybuilder?
Yeah.
Right? Because are they not taking care of their body to that standard? And because they don't have, 100 plus pounds of muscle, does that make them not good enough? Right? And I think a lot of people get caught up into that world of, I need more muscle. I need more muscle. Yes, we do know that muscle is great for preventing a lot of future problems, but how much is enough?
Yeah.
Just like the money question.
Yeah.
How much is enough?
Yeah. Because statistically, most people aren't happier. And Yeah. You know, I watched, I'm not completely done, but I watched the Arnold documentary.
Yeah.
I don't know if, have you seen it?
Hmm.
I'm I'm halfway through the third part, but I just was, it really reminds me, like, whoever said that this is your identity and you have one fixed thing. You get to choose where you go with your life. You could be a quote unquote bodybuilder, soccer player, or a gym owner, or you could have multiple businesses or a CEO. And we're multifaceted creatures. And who's to say that success
Yeah.
is this fixed definition? And, anyways, I it's beautiful how we get to create our lives. And the other thing I remember someone saying, or I think this is statistically elderly people saying that one of their biggest regrets is living the life that other people wanted them to live instead of living one that was true to themselves and their vision. And I see a lot of people that, it's weird, you know, I see almost a lot of people trying to be weird even, but it's for the sake of getting attention.
Yeah.
But I always say, I just wish I could I just want to use my life. I'm trying to be my most authentic self and kind of strip down all the layers. And I've even said, I've had friends ask me, how are you doing? And I'm like, you know, what's weird is well, it's not weird, but like, I feel the most myself I have ever felt before. And it's really dang a neat place to be. And then I get to build off of that and create from it. And I sometimes feel like I look around and I'm really inspired by people who are just very true and authentic to themselves and their skill sets, and grow from them, and even almost capitalize on what they're good at, but then also fine tune their weaknesses. And our life we get to really create. And I think our minds are really our biggest barrier.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it's you just you just hit it right there. You know, I think like you said, we all want to have some sort of title or identify ourselves as something, right? And so sometimes we go out of our way to act a different way just to have some type of title.
yeah.
I don't know where I'm going. I don't really know what's going on in my life, but that thing over there looks really cool, so I'm just going to go and name myself that. I'm going to name myself a bodybuilder. I'm going to name myself a business owner. And you see this now on social media. You see entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody wants to be called something. And I've personally have been one of those people too in the past. I remember when I first started my business, it was like, yeah, I'm a business owner.
Yeah.
Right? And
it's something you should be proud of too.
You should.
You've worked
right?
towards it.
You should, but I mean, what does that mean, though? And I don't think many people really ask themselves, like, what does being a CEO mean? Right?
So you could also be the CEO of a one-person business,
Right,
or you could
right.
be
You're an employee to
yourself,
right? And we see that a lot, right?
Yeah.
But which goes back to that, right? Like, what is the purpose of the business you are building?
Yeah.
If you're a CEO, then what does that mean? If you're a CEO, you're a leader. So what does leading mean to you? Who are you leading? And what are you leading with? And what are you teaching? And what are you providing for, right? Because I think businesses are solutions to problems, right?
Yeah.
So how are you solving a problem?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think sometimes you get caught up in like, oh, I made this amount of money. And we know that a lot of business is not done right.
Yeah.
So if we're going to go based off status, is that person very successful, or and that's where I think people get caught up and they don't find themselves being happy no matter how much money they have, right? Because they've gone out of their way to get this sort of status, like I'm the best at this, but I hate what I do.
Yeah.
And I do also think, like you said, that we have multiple things to do, right? Like I bodybuild. That's one thing that I do. I run a business. That is one thing that I do. I'm also an educator. I love to educate.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody will say, you're a podcaster. No, I just love having conversations.
Yeah.
And I finally decided to not care what other people think and
Yeah.
actually just buy the equipment and put some effort into it and just go out of my shell and invite people to the table that we just built,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And be able to tap into other people's minds,
Mm.
right? Somebody else sees that a podcaster, or somebody else will name it as a podcaster.
Yeah.
But I just want to have some positive conversations, and I
Yeah.
want to learn. And, I'm not a big reader.
Yeah.
And I find myself, I've discovered over the last 2 years that I love to have conversations. I
Yeah.
love to sit down with very smart people and
Mm.
just ask questions. Why?
Yeah.
Why is that? Why do you think that way?
Yeah.
Right? And give my opinion as well. I've found
Mm.
myself that I have a very strong opinion. And sometimes society makes you feel like you need to keep your opinion to yourself.
Hmm.
Right? And I think that's one of the things that's caught my attention with podcasts, and I found myself watching a lot of them and watching these long conversations of people just challenging each other, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can sit at this table, get along, and we can agree to disagree, right?
Yeah.
Like we can
There's
say
space
like
to respect each other
I
and
get where you're
differences.
going from or how you see it, but I see it this way,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Hmm.
it's interesting,
Yeah.
something to think about.
I love that you say that you have strong opinions, because I feel like a lot of people walk on eggshells almost, feeling like, oh, I shouldn't insert my feelings here, because gosh, there's something so amazing about not just being the nice guy or the nice girl that just is almost a yes person who just goes with it. There's something about having your own convictions and living true to them and being able to hold space for other people in theirs as well. It's this inquisitive nature that I think is missing sometimes, where we could probably solve so many things just by having a discussion as opposed to making assumptions. And I love that people have differences. It creates that space of, oh, I could look at myself and be like, oh, I could learn from them. And I feel a little bad for even kids that are growing up. This is a side thing where they weren't. You and I are about the same age. It's like I almost feel bad that they've grown up in this day and age where it's not common to stop and to just discuss the differences or similarities, even in conversations with people. If you ever go somewhere and you're meeting someone for the first time, it's, oh, what are you into? What are you passionate? It's almost like we're trying to find this area of common interest, as opposed to just being curious about who they are and what makes them them, and learning from each other. I think some of my most growing moments in life were when I was traveling for a couple years, and I just met so many people and so many perspectives, and getting myself out of the Midwest and seeing different parts of the world opened up my eyes to different perspectives of, wow. I mean, I remember, even, not that we ever expected to talk about this on this podcast, but I remember going to Fiji, and I was there for about 6 months in total between a couple trips, and they had so little. But they were so happy. You walk everywhere and they're like, "Bula, bula." And they break out in song and dance. And I remember stopping and talking to one of them, and they said, you Americans, you might have a lot, but you don't seem very happy. And I was like, I was 18.
You don't know what you're talking about.
and I stopped though, and I'm like, you're right. You have something that we don't have, and it's not monetary, and it's not stuff. You have family. They take siestas, and they have this afternoon time together, and they just embrace spending that quality time as a family and with friends. And I feel like sometimes moments like that, the trajectory of my life would have been different, because I saw that perspective instead of just being the standard, go to college, do this. It opened up my eyes. So what I'm going at is, what you're saying is having these conversations is so important and so necessary to stop and talk to a stranger, figure
Yeah.
out their story, because there's so much depth to people that we don't know about. And I learned that even from the feedback that we got from the last podcast. And what I've learned too, which is true, is if one person's thinking it, there's usually multiple people that just aren't saying it.
Yeah, 100%.
So I don't know, just I think this makes a big difference in helping people realize, number one, that they're not alone, that people who run businesses and do bodybuilding are not perfect, that, it's taken years to develop that type of discipline and mindset, and building a concrete why behind it. Like your business. I mean, if you don't have your why, it's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Because
It gets tough.
yeah.
It gets really tough. And it's a lot of work, right? And so sometimes it's very easy to get caught up into the, what if I did something else? What if I sold it? What if I did this, right? Like, and today was one of those conversations, actually, where we're looking at it, and it's like, we're about to break through this wall, and it's like, what do we do right now? We're going through some resistance, right? And so how do we deal with this situation right now? Do we just keep pushing?
Yeah.
Or do we find an easier alternative, which is turn around?
Yeah.
It's like, no, we go forward. We know why we're here,
Yeah.
right? We keep going forward, and we figure out the solution to this problem. If it's it's not a problem, but we find the solution to this resistance that we're getting, right?
Yeah.
We're right there. But I do want to touch on the traveling, because I think the different perspectives is very important. And that's something that I found myself too. I started traveling when I was 18. And every year I took a trip on my birthday. And I've done it for the last, 13 years now.
Yeah. When's your birthday?
April 1st.
Okay.
And then Dre's the 15. So
we're
2 weeks. Yeah, we're 2 weeks apart. So now we go on a trip every April or March, somewhere around that time.
That's perfect, actually. You guys both get to celebrate your birthday. And
I like going to third world countries. I like going to countries where you learn, where it's a different type of perspective, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not the American. I started off because it was what I could afford.
Yeah.
Right? I remember my first trip was to Puerto Rico. Then I went to Jamaica. I went to Thailand. I went to the Philippines.
Yeah.
I've been to Mexico. But everywhere I go, I don't go to the touristy area.
Same.
I always find myself in some type of small town, some type of village off the beaten path. And I always find myself on some interesting journey with some people. And I'm like,
right?
What am I doing here right now? Had a scare in Jamaica, so it taught me a lesson very quickly, right?
Yeah.
But even then, it was like, okay, you need to be aware that there's still danger around, right? But now that has given me so much perspective coming back here and understanding people. And like you said, what would my life be if I didn't have that? What would my life be if I didn't go to New York and experience a different type of culture, right? A different style of living. And I think a lot of people need to get out and need to have different conversations and need to put themselves in very uncomfortable positions where it's hard to communicate.
Yeah.
Right? And it's also really hard to look at, especially coming from the American culture, it's really hard to look and go, like, for example, go to a third world country. A lot of people go and feel bad immediately. Like, don't feel bad for them.
Like they're less than you.
Yeah,
or
like
something.
they're less, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so all of a sudden you raise yourself to this level of like, this is a standard of living. And oh my God, poor people. Right.
Yeah.
And like you said, usually some of the things that I've gotten out of it was that, like, they're happy. They're living a good life. I am very fortunate that I grew up in America and we have a good healthcare system and we have all these other things and we understand business, and that's also great. There's nothing wrong with that either. But you need a little bit of everything to be well-rounded, right? And I remember the first time I went to Thailand, And there was a big group of us that we were hanging out. We're buzzed. And at this time, we worked in the restaurant industry. So when you go to the PP Islands, it's just all alcohol everywhere. And so we're hanging out at this one booth, and we tell this guy like, "Hey, we'll bartend for you, and we'll sell out all the alcohol right now." And sure enough, like he's like, "All right, let's do it." And we get behind the booth, and obviously the Americans attract other Americans, and everybody's trying to figure out what's going on, and so we started selling tons of alcohol, and then he asked us to leave. It hit a point. I think it hit a point where he just kind of like realized what was going on, and he asked us to leave. And we're like, "What's going on, right? Like, we're making money." And he's like, I need to make sure that everybody else around here makes the same amount, or everybody gets a fair share, and I can't be taking everything.
Yeah.
And that was a big moment for us, where like we can't go to different places and try to push our culture on other people. We can't. Like, we're there to understand, we're there to learn, but we're not here to push our perspective or our way of being on other people. We just need to be able to put it out there and allow people to take it if they want, right?
Yeah.
And that's what conversation allows to happen, right? Because it also happened to me with coaching. I'm very direct when it comes to coaching, or I've been very direct, and I like to be very honest with people and upfront of like, "Hey, this is what's going on." But I also love to tell people what to do. And that was a big part of my early stages of coaching, always telling people what to do. Or I learned something and I want to go and tell someone, "Hey, you should do it this way." Right? And over the years, I've learned that I just need to share my stories. I need to just be open about my experiences and let people take it for what it is. If people then decide to ask for help, then you go ahead and you give it, but don't go out and push it on to people. Yeah. And so that's been a big realization for me, and I've got it from traveling, right? And it goes back to something that you said earlier about not fitting in. I find it very hard to fit in.
Me too.
I found it very, very difficult to fit in, right? And I find it very difficult to go into a place with strangers and have conversations, but then I can sit at a table here and talk for an hour and a half nonstop.
Yeah.
Right. And some of my good friends, some of my probably closest friends that I have are not local. They don't live here. Most of my good friends are foreigners. Yeah. Right. They're from Colombia. They're from Argentina. They're from all different places of the world. Yeah. And it's interesting to see that, right? Because completely different perspectives of how they see life. But one thing that I've learned with them is conversation. They take the time to listen. They take the time to explain. And those conversations have been the places where I've been able to be the most honest without being judged.
Yeah.
And, I don't see that a lot here, unfortunately, or at least in the circle that I've been lately.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is something that I look forward to build and to contribute to others. Right. And just be able to listen and understand, and share my vulnerabilities too.
Yeah.
And like you said, right, you start putting this stuff out, which is really scary to show quote unquote weakness as some of us may see it. Yeah. Right. The biggest fear. And then you get the complete opposite, which is just blows your mind the first time you experience it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that's what you got some of that this last podcast, right?
Yeah.
Just the amount of people that reached out.
Yeah. Well, I think if you show people that you're perfect, you're not going to touch anybody, because no one can relate, because no one is perfect. No one has it all figured out. So when we apply our own stories, I love that you shared that. You're like, wow, I just learned if I start sharing my story, then you draw people in because they have a point of where they can relate with you. And I think a lot of people don't talk about their lives, or they even probably look at this, at you doing this podcast, and are in admiration over the fact that you are willing to share about your life and other people's lives. And it creates this like, oh wow, I'm really not alone in this. And it's so necessary. We have to put our stories out there in a healthy capacity, obviously. Sometimes it's a little hard to know what's appropriate for what time and what environment, because you don't just want to throw everything out there. And because, there's some things that aren't meant to be shared on a public platform, right? So you have to kind of be delicate about that. But, show people that you're perfect and what they should do, and they're not going to listen because they can't relate. And there's a lot of, even when we touch on, oh, how are you disciplined? Well, you could Google that. You could Google how to be motivated. You're going to get a list of things, but if you have to tap into the why and the mindset, the heart behind it. And what I see you doing here is you're engaging your heart into doing these podcasts, and you're building connections. And I agree, you're great with connecting with people. I also am I'm personally not a huge reader. I'm a very auditory learner. And so I listen to a lot of podcasts, audible books, and love engaging with people. And I'll confess too that I talked about the fire going out, and sometimes we have experiences in life, whether it's relationships or things where either we get hurt or we hurt somebody or vice versa. And it can feel like, oh gosh, I just don't really want to connect with people because I've been hurt. And I think even things like that bleed into our the way that we view health and fitness. And it's I'm a very holistic, see the whole picture, because I think that our environment and everything else impacts how we apply ourselves in life. The fitness, nutrition, health, all of those things, the exercise components, they all come from a deeper place, because we all know you could look up a diet plan online. We all know, but there's something deeper that people are digging for, and there's a reason why people are tuning in and listening, is because there's this heart behind it. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think that people just really want to people crave connection. It's odd. We're in this. We're in the most connected part of life. Like, we're so connected, but we're so disconnected. And we really just crave connection. And it's few and far between. I feel like I have a lot of people in my life, but there's really I have like 5 best friends. And those, each one of those conversations with each of those people could be a podcast in its own. I listen to what they have to say, and I'm like, and the way I feel afterwards is like how I felt after talking to you last time. It was just, my heart was on fire, and I was passionate, and I was excited about tomorrow. And okay, what kind of difference am I going to make this week? And it prompts me to wake up and ask myself, okay, I'll close my eyes in the morning, and I'm like, all right, who are we going to touch today? What's the intention of today? I have my day 1 and my day 2 in my 24 hours, and then I sleep. So, I get more intentional with those things. So I think this podcast is a platform for people to start seeing the real life and the struggles and the practical how-tos, and what works for people, and what works for me may not work for you, and vice versa. And I think if people listening can just apply some of the practical things to their own life, maybe they work a night shift and they won't have the same hours, but applying some of the practical things, and I think is helpful for us all, myself included. It's good for me to put myself out there more, because and we all have a story, and like you said, like, you have strong opinions. I do too. And for years, I think sometimes this goes along with being a woman, is being a people pleaser, being a lot, but not too much. There's this weird, delicate balance, and I'm kind of over it.
Yeah.
kind of over it, because I just want to be myself. I just want to be Michelle. And I just want to help Christian be the most Christian ever. And I want other friends to be the most themselves. And I don't ever want to say, if you do XYZ, you'll get this outcome. Right. I want to say, no, take this and apply it to yourself and become the best version of you.
Yeah.
You know?
The best coaching. You know what was interesting after we spoke, because like I said, I was sitting there and I'm like, wow, like that was a great conversation. And I know that both of us were a bit nervous at the beginning, and we had some moments where we're, and obviously this has just gone. It's flowed very easily. But I asked, I put a story, I put a question. It was, when was the last time you had a conversation with a person in a room without distractions? And it was pretty surprising to see that people haven't had a conversation like that in a long time, right? And I mean, when you think about it, like if I was to tell you, all right, when's the last time you had a conversation? You'd be like, yesterday. Okay, great. Let me ask you again. When was the last time you had a conversation for an hour? That's going to take you a little bit more time to think about that, right? Okay, great. You figured that day out. When was the last time you had a conversation for 1 hour in a room with nobody walking in? It's been a while, right? And now what about with no phone in front of you? Right? Because like you said, even though we're so connected now, and I'm guilty of it myself. Like I'm at dinner and I'm on my phone, right? We're having a conversation and I'm thinking of what I'm gonna do next and stuff like that. But in a moment like this, like I can't think of the next thing because I'm actively listening. I really have to try hard to listen to what you're saying. And if you go too long, like it's really complicated to remember what you said, right? And obviously having the pressure of the cameras, you have to be very good at listening. You have to be very quiet and open up your ears, right? But how many other times do we do that outside?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, well, one, I would love to challenge people to actually go lock themselves in a room and just talk for an hour.
Or even just be with themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, we distract ourselves from. There was some study that was done, and I wish I could pull it up on my mind right now, but it's just not there. I'm gonna blame prep brain. Most people can't sit with themselves for more than in silence for like 5 minutes. There's always got to be music or something or some kind of distraction. We live in a very distracted world where most people literally can't even sit with themselves, let alone another person, and actually connect. And yeah, I would challenge myself and everybody to be able to do that. And if we're meant for it.
Yeah.
And I think too, when it comes down to finding those people, we realize I can be around a lot of people, but I've identified places in my life and times in my life where I felt very lonely and I was surrounded by people. Or you can even be in a relationship. I have this statement, like I'd rather be single and alone than lonely in a relationship. And I'm not saying that necessarily applies to any of my relationships. It's just, you can be next to somebody and feel lonely. And that can be friendships, that can be any relationship. And I think there's a lot of very lonely people who are surrounded by people. And if we can tune in and connect more, become inquisitive, maybe a little less thinking about ourselves all the time, slightly less connected on the phones. It's so weird to me sometimes when I'm in the gym and people walk up to me and they're like, I follow you on Instagram. And I'm like, I don't know why, but it always catches me off guard.
Oh my God, there she is.
No, not at all like that. But it's just like, hi, I'm, or it's just weird where people will message on social media, but you see them in real life and they won't even look at you in the eyes.
Yeah.
And I'm like just a very hands-on, direct, hi, good to see you, kind of, yeah, I don't know. It's odd to me. We live in a different day and age.
Yeah.
But I'd like to be the difference, if that makes sense. I'd like to be the person who actually connects with people because I think that's what people want.
Yeah.
What they crave.
100%. Yeah, I think people are very afraid of conversations. And I just don't think there's enough practice,
Yeah.
right? The practice is gone,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
all a text. Everything's a text, everything's social media. So we're lacking a lot of practice nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it very difficult. It makes it very difficult for the new generations that haven't been exposed to an actual conversation because
Yeah.
everything's through social media, um, which I find very interesting because with the new generation, like I have a group of kids that I found, the kids that I coach, I found that some of them follow me on Instagram,
Yeah.
and it's so interesting to see that they're on this social platform, but they don't have any content put out. They don't have any photos of themselves. They're all blank pages, and it's like 0 photos, like 2,000 followers, right? So,
Yeah.
and it's like they live in this temporary short story. They live in the stories. It's like one story a day. That's it. But they have a social media so they can go and look at like other people's lives, but they don't. They're too afraid to post a picture of themselves, or they'll have a picture of themselves with like this square covering their face. And it was so interesting.
Huh.
And it's all like this high school generation, middle school generation that I'm starting to see.
Yeah.
And I have 18 kids, and I look at all their, and most of them do that. But I did notice something different recently, and I like to think that it's confidence. So we've been working with them for about a year now, a little over a year. And these soccer players obviously came in very scrawny, right? And we've been working with them, and they've been building muscle. And so over this last, like some of them are going into high school this fall. Most of them have put on 15 to 30 pounds over the last year. They obviously hit puberty too.
Yeah.
So it was just like the perfect timing that we grabbed them. But for the first time the other day, like it was like all of them posted a picture. It was so weird. It was so interesting how it was.
I know it's the trickle down
It was
effect.
a trickle
One
down
person
effect.
did and
Was brave enough to post it, and
Yeah.
then all of them. I think it was like their soccer photos. Somebody took a bunch of photos of them. But it was like the first time I saw all their Instagrams with a photo.
Yeah. Huh.
And I was like, I wonder if that's the confidence now that they have built over time,
Yeah.
where they feel comfortable with who they are, and because they know they've been putting in the work, and obviously they feel a little stronger, and just the effect of exercise too, right? Like what that makes you, how that makes you feel about yourself,
Yeah.
which makes me think as well, if that was the case, then how are all these teenagers feeling at the moment? Which is
Yeah.
tough because
Yeah.
we're working with the youth, and it's very difficult to have a conversation with the high school kids. They just don't. I mean, Andrea was telling me a story of a girl that her mom had to drop her off, and she was just like shaking and, just like this type of look.
Yeah.
And COVID's gone, and now I still see I see high school kids with their masks, and then everybody has now this hair that goes all the way down to here. So this is
You
the
only
only thing that they
see-
show.
Yeah.
Super interesting what's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So I think we need to do a better job of putting ourselves out there and being very intentional with the type of conversations that we have and making time for that. I think a big thing that we don't see a lot is dinner at the table. And
Is that something you grew up with?
yeah, every day.
Yeah.
Right? And it was like dinner was always when my dad got home. So we would always wait for my dad to get home, and we would always sit down and have dinner. Right? Unless I was at a tournament, or unless sometimes we would practice until like 9 p.m. Then obviously I would get home and I would eat and go to bed. But yeah, we always had dinner at the table, and I don't think that happens anymore.
Not very often, no.
So, the kids are not getting the conversations at home because they're on social media, or at school because it's all through social media. they're not getting it at home, right? Because they're on some video game, or they're again on social media, and the parents are on social media as well. So there's just this lack of communication that is happening, and we're losing it. We're completely losing this type of interaction, and it's really affecting us. I think it is.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I feel like I've decided to just start putting stuff out. I'm like, I'm gonna be the first one to say it. This is how I feel. This is what I think. Like, what do you think, or what do you see? And let's just put it out, and let's figure this out, because we need more people on board, right? And I want to continue challenging people to go and say stuff that goes against others.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it's okay. I mean, everyone's
it's
got
fine.
their own individual story, and people deserve to be in their own visions and in their own dreams too. I think a lot of people think, oh no, that's just for them. Well, it's powerful. Just like, I mean, something as simple as the one kid, I mean, this is a horrible example, but you just brought it up, is the one kid posted a picture, and then it was the trickle effect. And, you know, it's one person shares their story. Well, that prompts someone to say, oh, gosh, me too. And then they start opening up more about their life. And sometimes it just takes a couple people to step up and say, hey, this is who I am, and we don't have to be the same. And I'd love to hear your perspective and hear about our differences. And there's something about having a non-judgmental platform of just letting people be who they are and learning from them, and being okay with there being differences even. But, you know, I think a lot of people are like, don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah. Well, share your story, right? If you've been following someone, and obviously social media allows you to take a look at so many people's life, and there's a lot of people that share their life story, right? Like, if you've been watching that story, reach out to them and say, like, hey, thank you for this. And, you know, if you want to share a little bit of yours, get out of your comfort zone and do that.
Yeah.
Right? Because realistically, like you said, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that attention. You are looking for that connection. Sometimes it's not going to come to you, and you're just going to have to go build that table and do it yourself, right? And I remember, like I told you the other day, right? Like, I've worked at this for the last 7 years, and we worked so hard at it. We put in so many hours, right? And we put in all this content out. Like, people have no idea how much content we have to, like, all this takes a lot of hours of time and effort, right? Figuring out what the right mic, it just takes a lot of work. And, you know, building a business and getting all the equipment and going through all this coaching and doubting yourself and putting your family life at risk. Like, there's all this ruckus that has happened for me to put this idea out for people and to contribute to other people's lives. And for the first time in 7 years, like, you're probably one of the only persons that looked at me in the eyes and said, like, hey, like, I'm proud of you. Like, I see what you're doing. Right. And it was like I was telling you, sometimes we get in our head and we're wondering, like, man, am I even doing the right thing? Right.
Yeah.
Because people, even though they see it and they know they're seeing the benefit of it, sometimes we don't speak out and we don't say what we're feeling because we're so afraid to talk. But sometimes that is what we need, because that's the fire that lights the next person up, which is actually going to give you more.
Yeah.
Right. And it's going to keep you going. And now I've been, since you said that, I think to myself, like, how many people are in my life that are doing great things or that have done something great for me that I haven't said thank you, or I haven't reached out and said, like, hey, you know what? I see you. I see what you're doing. And, you know, just keep going, because sometimes that's just what one person needs. And all of a sudden it's like this switch happens. Yeah. And, you know, it fires a person up. And if we were to multiply those comments over and over and over again, right? Like, if I start doing that, you start doing that, all the people that you tell it to start doing it, like, it's this trickle effect.
Yeah.
And I think that's what podcast allows us to do. It allows us to put out our thoughts and challenge people, and, you know, and start a movement, I think. And I think it's time for change. I think it's time for us to really start helping people move in a positive direction. Whether that's like I said, whether it's 100 people, 1,000 people, a million people, right? But we had to take ownership that is what we're put on this earth for, and that's what we're going to do for the rest of our life. So, that's all I got.
That's all you got. Thanks again. I do see you and appreciate you. And sometimes we just need one person to look at us and like, hey, I believe in you. And it just ignites that reassurance in us of, oh, okay, I am making a difference here. And I know I've had people do that in my life. And it's one of the best things we can do is see each other and, hey, appreciate what you're doing in this world. And thank you for being, I think there's a lot more good in the world than we realize, but we're so good at talking about the bad, and identifying that, and we're surrounded by it. So thank you for the good you're doing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I call it myself, like I'm a problem solver. So I'm purposely always looking for a problem to solve. Sometimes things need to just be the way they are, or you need to start looking at the positive side of things. So, well, it was a pleasure. Let's go.